oh, I'm going to love myself in the way that makes me feel good about myself or the way that makes me feel special. But that's not really love unless you're also recognizing your ordinariness or the fact that you're a small piece of something much, much bigger. And that's a more profound kind of self love.
Welcome to Stoic Conversations. My name is Caleb Ontiveros.
And I'm Michael Tremblay.
And today, Michael put together some notes on a topic that we got an email about, and that also I think people frequently post about on Reddit, and as well as other discussion forums. So I think this should be a good practical topic we'll be going through on a problem a lot of people face. So you want to introduce that for us and set the stage?
Yeah. So today's topic is about meaning and motivation, or in other words, how do the Stoics recommend addressing the sensation of a lack of meaning or a lack of motivation in your own life? So this was inspired. We got, as you mentioned, we got an email from a listener. And they were asking about how Stoicism can help with low level dissatisfaction with life, feelings of sadness, lack of purpose. I think of this as kind of a general malaise. Maybe you feel in a fog. You don't feel tuned in. You don't feel excited about things the way you used to be. That's that to me is a really interesting question because we often frame the Stoicism is a lot about getting your emotions right, feeling. It has this goal of happiness and flourishing. But when we talk about emotional therapy in Stoicism, we often talk about dealing with these extreme passions, right? Like, oh, I'm angry. How can I be less angry? I'm in grief. How can I experience less grief? Or change my relationship with grief. How can I be less anxious in these kind of debilitating moments of anxiety? And I thought this was kind of more of a, instead of these 10 out of 10, how do you deal with this, like this kind of 4 out of 10 that stays with you and eats at you, bugs you? Another incentive for this. So along with that email from a listener, I read this Reddit post that connected with this idea of motivation, which I think is also tuned into this kind of general dissatisfaction. And the post on Reddit said, quote, "How does Stoicism help you deal with a lack of motivation? Every day I wake up feeling like doing nothing. Honestly, it's so weird. It's almost as if life was not worth living. I'm just there hanging around. I'm aware of my capacity, and I know if I work harder, if I worked at all, better said, I would achieve good outcomes. But it's just, I don't know. It's hard to explain. I want to be virtuous, but I don't feel like doing much. What do you think?" Yeah, great question. And so today's episode is about what is the Stoic response to that question? When you're sitting in bed and you don't feel like doing much and you recognize you have a capacity for something more, but you're not able to achieve it, or you don't have the motivation to achieve it. So today's going to be a deep dive into that and how the Stoics would respond. Anything you wanted to add by way of context, Caleb?
I think that's well said. I suppose a lot of people do come to Stoicism because they think it's a solution to, and they find that it's a solution to really obvious challenges, obstacles they face in life that maybe cause significant amounts of pain and such. But it's equally true that there are moments in life where it's almost as if there's nothing going wrong with your life at the time, at least nothing you can easily identify, but you do feel a sense of dissatisfaction, the lack of motivation that was expressed in the post you read. And I do think Stoicism has resources for that kind of issue as well, and it's one that I don't think anyone's going to be an alien to. So it's certainly worth discussing.
Everybody's been there.
Yeah.
We all, if you're not going through it right now, this could be prepare you for something in the future as well. So I'm going to go through maybe 4 Stoic strategies or 4 ideas to keep in mind for a Stoic approach to these issues. So number 1 is kind of a groundwork. We in this channel, we always kind of base the recommendations, try not to take quotes out of context, but base them in the psychological and philosophical foundations of Stoicism. And the first thing when we're talking about Stoicism is that idea in Stoicism that you are how you think. So a crisis in meaning or a crisis in experience, crisis in motivation is going to be a crisis in thinking. It's going to be a crisis in terms of your values and your beliefs. Maybe not a crisis in terms of those things, but it's going to be downstream. You feel this way because of the way that you conceptualize, relate to the world. It is going to be a kind of an intellectual problem. There are ways, we encourage mindfulness, meditation. I think sport is excellent. There's ways of coming to knowledge and changing perspective through embodied activities. But Stoicism at the end of the day says, if you want to feel differently, you're going to have to think differently. And that's just some ground, like a base ground level of understanding that the rest of the advice is going to be meeting. The quote for that, I have Epictetus Handbook 5, where Epictetus says it's not events that disturb people, it is their judgments concerning them. That's Stoicism 101. So if you feel like not getting out of bed in the morning, it's not it's not the events themselves that is causing that sensation. It is your judgments about them, and so they're going to look to address the judgments. Um, and this is meant to be a descriptive psychological fact. So it's when we feel a general malaise about life, we've lost a perspective, we've lost focus on beauty, joy, or meaning. So the question is going to be, how can I regain that perspective? How can I change those judgments so that I can refocus on those good things and feel the motivation that comes from being focused on or thinking about the good, the worthwhile, the meaningful in life? Any thoughts on
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think we can dive into some potential beliefs that people might have that can bring about this kind of low level dissatisfaction.
Mm-hmm.
I think when people are younger, perhaps you have lack that sense of purpose, perhaps because you simply don't have beliefs about what your purpose is, or perhaps have beliefs about your own capabilities and your inability to live up to a purpose in the future. That might result in a sense of aimlessness.
Mm-hmm.
As people get older, maybe it's a little bit, I think it might be a little bit different, where they look back on their life and see how these are ways things could have gone, but those opportunities are now closed. And of course, there's a sense that people understand that those opportunities are closed, but I think with that reality comes in, an updating of who you are, what do you do now, and how do you shape the rest of your life, given uh, this is who you are now at this time. Your choices are cemented in the past, and I think if anyone looking back on their life is going to feel some amount of pride and also perhaps some amount of regret and remorse at where they've ended up. So
Yeah.
I think that's maybe a little bit of a stab at maybe what's going on behind some of these questions and what can cause dissatisfaction. Some beliefs that might cause dissatisfaction, kind of aimlessness that often results in this lack of motivation as well.
Yeah. Well, I think everyone's situation is going to be different, but I think those are two important categories. And I like that they're two sides of the same coin. So one is, when you're younger, not really being able to see the purpose, not seeing the path, not seeing what you're aiming towards, so that it makes any like plans of action maybe not seem worthwhile. Or as you said, you lack confidence. So, well, I'm not going to try, or there's no point in me doing that. And then the flip side, when you're older, is saying, oh, what could have been, what I could have done. And a kind of
Right.
frustration with that, or this sense of like loss, almost like a grief of your previous potential. And I think what's interesting for me, at least, is thinking on that's not the only reason people feel this way. But on that in particular, I think there's this funny fact, like the Stoics are always going to ask us to think about the fact of the matter. And there's this fact that people kind of retain that feeling even as they get older. If you go on, you're going to see somebody who's 21 posting. I go on Reddit a lot. That's the internet community I spend time on. And you see people that are 21 posting like, "Is my life over? Like I've wasted so much time." And everyone's just like, yeah, like, what are you talking about? Things are just beginning. And I'm 30. You should You just wait until you're that age, and I'm sure a 50-year-old would feel the same way, and I'm sure a 70-year-old would feel the same way. That kind of I guess that cycle doesn't end of both like feeling ambiguous about the future and regretting what could have been in the past, but knowing that people older than you see the potential in their own past, that has to be kind of motivating or make you understand that you'll one day be looking back, being like, oh, I could have really done something here, something exciting. That's something that I always think about.
Yeah, that's well put. That's well put.
And so, um, I think another thing that you were hitting on there is a kind of a general, you feel meaningless or you feel unmotivated because maybe there's a lack of meaning, there's a lack of purpose. And so people will say that, they'll call that out explicitly. I don't think that's the only cause of it, but that's an important one. And so one of the ways that the Stoics are going to get around this issue, so they're going to be looking at how can we change your perspective, how can we call out these beliefs about there's no real point to any sort of long term plan. There's nothing I can really get excited about. I'm not really feeling engaged with the work I am doing. These are the kind of beliefs the Stoics are going to try to target. And so one of the suggestions they make is to try to reconnect with your role. Take your role and reconnect with the broader world by reminding yourself of that role that you play in something bigger than yourself. So I mean that
Mm-hmm.
I could say that better, but the idea is, if you're kind of solipsistic, you're sitting in your own head, you're trying to self-generate this motivation. Well, no, beliefs about meaning, purpose, excitement, that comes in the way that we relate to other things. It's not something you self-generate in a vacuum. So go and interact with the broader world. Remind yourself of the connection you have to that, and remind yourself really of this purpose that you can play, both in terms of helping others, in terms of achieving things, in terms of contributing to things that are worthwhile. And that's a way to help you get outside of your own head. That was abstract. So I'll pull an example from Marcus Aurelius. This is Meditations, book 5, chapter 1. And I always love when Marcus wrestles with these issues because he's the emperor of Rome. So he's in such an important position and really shows that it applies to everybody. But he says, quote, "At dawn, when you have trouble getting out of bed, tell yourself, I have to go to work as a human being. What do I have to complain of if I'm going to do what I was born for? The things I was brought into the world to do. Or is this what I was created for? To huddle under the blankets and stay warm? So you were born to feel nice instead of doing things and experiencing them? Don't you see the plants, the birds, the ants and spiders and bees going about their individual tasks, putting the world in order as best they can? And you're not willing to do your job as a human being. Why aren't you running to do what your nature demands? You don't love yourself enough, or you'd love your nature too and what it demands of you." Um, such a powerful quote. Any first reflections on that quote, Caleb?
Oh no, it's one of my favorites. Certainly, I think in a way, one aspect I like about this part of Stoicism is that it serves as a reminder that finding one's purpose isn't always that hard. I don't mean to be too trite, but in a
Yeah.
sense, Marcus Aurelius says he's just saying, just look, you have a role you've already been assigned. Don't try to, don't let yourself overcomplicate things. You have a role as a human being. It's simply serving other humans, doing your duty. In his case, being an excellent Roman emperor, and you have that role just in the way you can see that these other creatures have their own roles, and perhaps a lot of sometimes I think these these periods in our lives when we feel a lack of a sense of purpose, we've lost sight of how clear our purpose is and how visible it would be if we just look for it.
Yeah, I love that quote. I love that idea of simple. The ant figured it out, the bird figured it out, and not to be trite and judgmental, but it's the idea of, as you said, not to overcomplicate it. Uh, you've got a family. You don't have family, you have friends. If you don't have friends, you live in a city, a community. There are people to engage with. People like really simple things. They like to be helped in their goals or their what they're aiming towards. They like good friendship and companionship. Integrate yourself into these things. Try to reconnect and find meaning in these things. Um, and there's also that idea of living in accordance with your nature and stoicism, and pointing out that you know you are living not in accordance with nature if you waste that potential. If you huddle in bed, you're almost forsaking these roles. And it doesn't have to be that grand standard of the emperor. It can be the ants, building the ant nest. It can be the spider spinning the web. They're
Mhm.
contributing, they're building. And it's like, yeah, as you said, keep it simple. Really just look to yourself and your immediate surroundings, and you'll find ways to meaningfully contribute. I found that really, I love that last part. I was like, oof. The quote is, "You don't love yourself enough, or you'd love your nature too, and what it demands of you." And I thought that was like, wow, this idea of it's a bit judgmental because he's writing to himself, but that idea of um, what comes with self love is that loving of the simplicity of it too. It doesn't have to be something super dramatic and weird. Like the spider that likes to be a spider is happy to spin the web, and the human that likes to be a human is happy to contribute in the small, meaningful ways we can to our own community and with our work, with our crafts, with our effort, things like this.
Yeah, absolutely. I also love the idea of oh, yeah, I love the idea of extending self love to something that's not merely selfish or
Mm-hmm.
focused on the ego. That's of course a common theme in uh, Greco-Roman virtue ethics, but this idea that part of self-love involves embracing who you are, and who you are is just this creature embedded in larger a larger
Yeah.
social network, and having these relationships. And when you properly love yourself, you're able to find meaning in your ordinary existence that you're already find yourself in. So I think that's also, I think, a powerful idea.
Yeah, I think about that idea in terms of loving other people. Like there's this often people find it difficult to understand the Stoic view that the sage wouldn't grieve. And I think about that in terms of, if you loved somebody fully in accordance with their nature, you're understanding their mortality is part of their nature. You're understanding that they will be someone that dies. Grief's a complicated one, but it's at least an attempt to resolve that, which is to say, to love somebody is to
Mhm.
love them fully, not just love them in a way that benefits you and makes you happy, right? Like, oh, I'm going to love you if I don't have the hard parts that come with loving a person. No, that's like that's a distortion of love in some way. And so that's the same idea as you were saying, put back on the self. Like, oh, I'm going to love myself in the way that makes me feel good about myself, or in the way that makes me feel special. But that's not really love unless you're also recognizing your ordinariness, or the fact that you're a small piece of something much, much bigger. And that's a more profound kind of self love. I agree with you.
Yeah, maybe a funny spin on this is that sometimes people talk about self care and taking time off for self care, whereas maybe the Stoic angle on this is, no, that's just being virtuous, right? That's
Yeah.
self care. You
Um,
don't need to take time off to do that.
yeah, totally. Self care would be like busy yourself like the ant, like if you're not actualizing yourself by like stopping to doing the things that you were meant to do. That's not the best you. The best you is the one that's doing the things you were meant to do.
Yeah, yeah.
Cool. There's another quote here. I mean, I want to stay along this. So the idea of this lesson is to like connect yourself with the broader world by reminding the role you play within it. And there's another beautiful quote from Marcus here about really an appreciation for nature. So there's one way of like getting yourself outside of your head by thinking about how you place yourself in the community. There's another by just like like emphasizing your connection to actually as part of a physical world, nature, and the more I mean, nature extends to everything in Stoicism. It's like the things that exist, but a little bit outside the domain of just other people and our own kind of interactions and that focus. So he has a quote here about the cultivation of a sense of the beauty in nature. This is book 3, chapter 2. Marcus says, we should remember that even nature's inadvertence has its own charm, its own attractiveness. The way loaves of bread split open on top in the oven, the ridges are just byproducts of the baking and yet pleasing somehow. They rouse our appetite without our knowing why. Or how ripe figs begin to burst, and olives on the point of falling. The shadow of decay gives them a peculiar beauty. Stalks of wheat bending under their own weight, the furrowed brow of a lion, flecks of foam on the boar's mouth, and other things. If you look at them in isolation, there's nothing beautiful about them. And yet, by supplementing nature, they enrich it and draw us in. And anyone with a feeling for nature, a deeper sensitivity, will find it all gives pleasure, even what seems inadvertent. He'll find the jaws of live animals as beautiful as painted ones or sculptures. He'll look calmly at the distinct beauty of old age in men, women, and at the loveliness of children. And other things like that will call out to him constantly. Things unnoticed by others. Things seen only by those at home with nature and its works. And the idea there is that beauty is available everywhere, meaning is available everywhere. There's a kind of a mindfulness, attention, and focus that allows you to call it out. Somebody sees the beauty in old age or the loveliness of children, and somebody doesn't. And it's building that skill.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Maybe one spin on this might be getting a little bit far afield or not entirely be related, but I was just thinking what this passage brought to mind just now is that I think sometimes this, when I think about myself, when I've been in these kinds of states, it can often emerge from a kind of ambition in the sense that one hasn't lived up to one's ambition. And of course, that can always drive one forward and cause one to do good and great things. But sometimes there is also the sense that, oh, I'm a failure because I didn't live up to what I was aiming to do or what I now feel I should have been aiming to do, and so on. And I think one maybe what one a strategy for that kind of thought, or something that shows that those kinds of thoughts can be illusions, of course, is just the Stoic line that what matters is self-mastery, not the attaining of external ambitions. Seneca, of course, has that famous letter where he says, I've done the thing that no conqueror could do. I've obtained self-mastery, victory over anger, desire, and such. And that's, the key goal for the Stoics is having a kind of self-mastery, of course, as well as expressing the other virtues, which involve understanding, one's own nature and the nature of other things. And now this brings me back to this quote, which is understanding, seeing, experiencing nature's inadvertent beauty. Just trying to connect this all together. Perhaps this might not be where all listeners are at by any means, but perhaps one finds oneself in a state of malaise due to failed ambition. The Stoicism calls one to back, not to, the fact that one failed to obtain some external success, but that what matters is, recognizing nature and, of course, how much progress you've made in developing your character. So that's what this passage brings to mind now.
Yeah, I think
What
that's
do you think
great.
about that?
I mean, so we're talking about a symptom that has a lot of different causes, and so I think I'll
Yeah.
stop caveating, and we'll just make it clear, moving forward. When we talk about one example, we don't think that's the only reason why you could be experiencing malaise. But I think you're right that we have these periods after ambition. I think about Olympic athletes, those that come fourth, or I think about this idea of there's a well-known phenomenon that people that come second at the Olympics feel much worse than those that come third, because those that come third are conceptualizing, oh, I won into the medal, and those that come second, I lost my chance at gold. And so it's a really simple example of how somebody can have it objectively better, but subjectively being suffering. Um, and I mean, it goes back to Stoicism almost 101, right? Which is like, if you place your value in external things, you're going to feel the ups and downs, the volatility that come with external things, because they come and go. We don't control them. They're not up to us. And so instead, we should focus our attention internally, and then both on that self-love I think Marcus was hitting on, and then I as you were saying, on our ability to recognize, to cultivate our character, to develop it. But part of that cultivation of our character is the recognition of beauty in other things, and our place in that beauty. So I think that was just building on what you were saying. I mean, I agree with your point, and I think it's a good one. It's about turning it. I mean, I think both of these exercises, looking at nature's beauty and looking at our role, are about focusing our attention on something that is the kind of thing that if you pay attention to, you will find meaning and purpose. There are many things that if you turn your attention to, you will not find meaning and purpose, or maybe you won't sustainably. And of that, like external ambition is one of those, at least one the Stoics call out. So totally agree.
Right. Yeah, and I think, and something nice about this quote also is that often as Stoics, we focus on keeping your attention on what you control, what's up to you, that's your character. And to get even more precise here, part of that is how we respond to nature, how we see it as a whole, not just nature in the terms of the environments, but the universe itself, the working of things, and being able to see the beauty in that. That's a crucial part of our character.
Yeah, it's a crucial part of how you think, is how much attention you spend on that. So those are two examples of, maybe emphasizing or putting attention on the kinds of beliefs that cause meaning. And then another strategy the Stoics are going to use if you're in this situation, I would say this is more if you're feeling kind of stressed, or you're really maybe fixating on a certain problem. Again, not a crisis, but a kind of low-level problem. You gave the example of, I don't feel like I've achieved anything, or something like this. One of the suggestions the Stoics provide is to play around. I describe it as playing around with time and scale. So again, shifting our attention, shifting our perspective, but along the dimensions of time and scale. And that can help us either find meaning, but also kind of recontextualize our problems. So one way we can do that is to take things moment by moment and discard the larger narratives about the way your life is going, or injustices you've faced, or disappointments you've experienced. And that hits exactly to the previous point we were discussing, Caleb. And Marcus has a beautiful quote, just like all of his are. They're really lovely. Book 8, chapter 36 on this. And he says, "Do not disturb yourself by picturing your life as a whole. Do not assemble in your mind the many and varied troubles which have come to you in the past and will come again in the future. But ask yourself with regard to every present difficulty, what is there in this that is unbearable and beyond endurance? You'll be ashamed to confess it. And then remind yourself that it is not the future or what has passed you that afflicts you, but always the present. And the power of this is much diminished if you take it in isolation and call your mind to task if it thinks that it cannot stand up to it when taken on its own." I mean, wow, this is a great quote. Just the idea that, one step in front of the other, one moment at a time. If you think about the injustices of your life as a whole, those you faced, or the disappointments you faced and might face in the future, things can be unbearable. But if you ask yourself, almost any situation, almost any minute, can I endure this minute? The answer is almost always yes. The answer is almost that we possess the power, the fortitude to have a good minute by minute. It's just when we let our mind, you wake up in the morning, you don't feel good. If you think, oh, I've got a whole day ahead of me, that is your mind stretching out, and then the weight of the day is keeping you in bed. But if you just say, I can get up this minute, I can get in the shower this minute, or I can make a plan this minute, that's a way to kind of re-empower yourself, just by focusing. No moment is unbearable. This is a Marcus idea that I return to regularly.
Yeah, yeah. And I think to tie it back to the post you mentioned at the beginning, waking up, experiencing a lack of motivation, it can be so clarifying to think, what's my next step here, and then proceeding to go about your day. And I think sometimes with action, with decisions to take this next step, motivation will arise. Because I think you're confirming that something is of value to you when you act, when you make decisions. And if something's of value, that can drive your actions. I think that's, for the Stoics, many other philosophers, that's motivating, that belief that something is of value, that something matters. So if you're laying in bed and think, I don't have any motivation to do this large project, to go through this day, you see it as a whole, it can be much easier to just think, what's that next step, and then taking it.
Yeah, love it. What's the next 5 minutes, or what's, as you said, the next step? I find this one really helpful. This is one that really helps me when I get stressed on a day-to-day basis. I think I can do the next step. Maybe I can't do the next 10, but if you do the next step 10 times in a row, then you've done the next 10. It's the trick to it. So the reason I frame this section as like playing around with time is that this part was about shrinking the time, shrinking it to moment, step by step. But Marcus also points out that we can expand time. And if you expand the time horizon, it often de-intensifies the problems. So here's another quote. Marcus says, constantly reflect on how swiftly all that exists is coming to be, all that exists and is coming to be is swept past us and disappears from sight. For substance is like a river in perpetual flow, and its activities are ever changing, and its causes infinite in their variation, and hardly anything at all stands still. And ever at our side is the immeasurable span of the past and the yawning gulf of the future, into which all things vanish away. Then how is he not a fool who in the midst of all this is puffed up with pride, or tormented, or bewails his lot, as though his troubles will endure for any great while? It's almost like I like to think about this in terms of like a magnifying glass of like your changing intensity. It's like you're looking for the right, I guess, level of zoom. And one trick is you can zoom in super tight if something's scary. And the other trick is you can zoom out. And either way, the thing that was in focus that might be disrupting your perspective or taking up your mind distorts and changes and hopefully alleviates. And so if you think of, maybe the idea of everything as being a yawning gulf of the future, maybe that's going to provide some people anxiety. But I like that idea of, everything is in flux. And when you feel unmotivated, as you talked about attacking some of those beliefs, there are some certainties you're asserting, right? Like things have gone this way and they'll continue to be this way. Things won't change. There's no point in doing this. Things will continue on the same way, whatever way you're thinking about it, or even like I'm frustrated with myself for being this way, but I can't change. Whatever way you're feeling about it, you're bringing with it almost kind of a certainty and a confidence. And I like that idea of like everything is in flux, everything is changing. When you look over a long enough time horizon, the things you thought for certain usually aren't the case, and that applies to a lot of these limiting beliefs as well, or a lot of these false judgments that are frustrating you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been listening to a book recently by Henry Oliver called Late Bloomers, which I think gets at this point nicely. So one example I mentioned earlier, there were sometimes people feel this sense of dissatisfaction is maybe when they're older and they feel like they haven't lived up to their purpose, or perhaps they feel like they've already achieved their purpose and they're not sure, what's next. And I think he catalogs a number of people who he considers late bloomers who really came to fruition in their artistic, professional endeavors later in life. And I think that speaks to your point directly, which is that many of these people didn't seal themselves off, didn't cement their future, and come to believe, oh, I can never be artistically successful. I can never achieve the thing that I've been striving for, or that I now find in myself a desire to do. Instead, I think they properly saw it as open. So many things can happen, and if you take that wider perspective and look at the range of human lives, so many people have experienced a change of trajectory in their life at any age, and this sense of malaise that might or that might sometimes happen, that might sometimes be brought about by the feeling that if your future is cemented, there is no more purpose for you, or whatever purpose you thought you had, you haven't lived up to. It might be an illusion when you think through all the different kinds of lives people have had and what people have been able to achieve, even late in the game.
Yeah, this is a great example. I mean, just saying that it is just factually backed up what Marcus is talking about here. And another way of thinking about it, which relates to what you're saying, is that we often think of uncertainty as being scary, but there's a lot of actually opportunity in uncertainty, randomness, change, and if you focus on the good part of that instead of the bad part of that, then it's like, well, maybe something great will happen. Maybe something will change in a way that's beneficial and unexpected. And I think that's a just as important a thing to keep in mind as the fact that you could lose something you like as well.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Just trying to tie that together is you can play with time, zoom in, zoom out, play with scale. See yourself from above. Of course, there's a common Stoic practice, viewing yourself from above, from the ceiling, from the above your city, picturing the whole earth, and continuing to zoom out. I think, and then we all this last way we mentioned you can zoom out is thinking about you're just one life in the sea of trillions of lives, and not to that a lot of uncertainty comes with that, and in addition to, I think, the fact that zooming out like that can put things into a proper perspective.
Yeah, I mean, there's a kind of humility to this coming through all the quotes, right? As you said, zooming out and realizing you're one of a trillion can put things in perspective. And above, we had comparing ourselves to ants. There's almost this like grandiosity. It's like I don't want to push it too far, but it's like by reducing yourself to just a part of nature, you actually regain your connection to nature, and nature is a great thing. So it's like if you try to be great on your
Right.
own, it's kind of difficult. So if you think, well, I'm not actually great, I'm not special, I'm just part of this bigger thing that is really great and special, well, then greatness and specialness actually comes back. It's kind of ironic.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah, I think so.
so so there were some strategies changing, reconnecting with our reconnecting with broader nature and things outside of ourselves to feel a sense of nature, as you said, playing with time and scale. And then the fourth piece of Stoic advice, which is a reminder I always like to give for myself, but I think is important for anybody on the Stoic journey, is also to just be gentle with ourselves in the process. Um, so this is the idea to I think what a Stoic would recommend is to remind yourself that you're not a sage. Everybody wants to be better or feel better and be motivated, but fluctuations and variations are normal. I'm thinking a lot about the Buddhist idea of the second arrow. Did a quick solo episode on that as well, but just that idea that when something bad happens and that first strikes you, that's the first arrow. But when we're upset with our reactions We're upset with the fact that it happened. We start adding judgments to it. That's a second arrow. And that second arrow is our own doing, and it often hurts twice as much because the wound's already there. That connects with this idea Seneca says of, we suffer more in imagination than in reality, which is just to say that, if you do experience these kinds of fluctuations in mood, I think one of the most important Stoic ideas is to say, well, try not to add the self-judgment, try not to add the self-frustration, because that's the second arrow. That's the suffering in imagination that doesn't have to compound. It's not needed. It only compounds the suffering in reality. I think about this quote from Seneca here. This is his Letters on Ethics, chapter 85, part 3. It says, it's a denial of human nature that someone's mind be immune to sadness. The wise person is not overwhelmed by grief, but is touched by it. And so I think there's that idea too, that is, we talked a lot about our natures, loving yourself, loving your nature. The point here is that it's a denial of human nature to think you will be immune to sadness. To love yourself is to also, recognize that you will be a thing that feels sad from time to time, that feels down, demotivated from time to time. And so don't add extra judgments that compound that or make that worse than it is an important point to keep in mind.
Yeah, I think so. I think the extra judgments are just sometimes another level of distraction or something that is taking you away from thinking well, from using your attention as in a way that would bring about the most happiness for you, I think. So
you could be thinking
I
about
think that's what
loaves of bread.
You're right. Yeah, very good thing. And that there's no, I think no need for that second arrow is always a fantastic metaphor. I think there's no need for it. All you need to do is return your attention to the matter at hand in each movement, and then it's just action by action, as Marcus Aurelius says.
Yeah, great. So to summarize, question was, how would a Stoic handle feelings of a low level dissatisfaction, sadness, lack of purpose? That feeling when you wake up in the morning and you don't want to get out of bed. You're not sure, not because this is not like a severe depression, but because you're like, well, I don't know what there is that's worth doing, right? I don't feel excited to do anything. And the things we talked about is recognizing that a crisis of meaning is connected to your values and your perspective and your attention. The Stoics think how you feel is based on what you think. It's not things themselves that harm us, but our judgments about them. So to improve how we feel, we have to improve how we think. How can we improve how we think? We can reconnect with our larger role, with our roles outside of ourselves, our connection to nature by changing focus. We can pay attention to the beauty in nature, the beautiful things that are around us, again, through attention and focus, something available to us as people. And that's when we think about the Stoic focusing on ourselves. This is a point you raised, Caleb. It's not just, can you be courageous? Can you be just? But it's also like, do you notice the beauty in a loaf of bread? Do you notice the beauty in a ripe fruit or in the face of an animal? That's another thing that's up to you, that determines your happiness. It is about your character and your attention. Other things we can do is we can play around with time and scale. So either focus on things moment by moment. What is the next task? Or zoom out, recognize, will this matter in 3 months, 3 years? Things have changed before. I'm nothing like I was 5 years ago. So I will be nothing like that 5 years from now. And I kind of need to question any sort of beliefs that lock me in or don't acknowledge that. And then the last part is this recognition that it's a denial of human nature to think that you will never be sad. Right? We will have fluctuations in mood. We will have fluctuations in behavior, ups and downs. It's a natural part of our experience. We want to get out of them, hence the strategy, hence the discussion today. But don't add additional judgments or additional suffering out of frustration about that, or thinking, this is unique or not something other people have experienced. I mean, Marcus Aurelius was writing 2,000 years ago about wanting to stay under the blankets because it's nice and warm, and he didn't even have a smartphone. So if he was going through it, it's totally natural and normal for anyone today to be doing as well or experiencing as well. Anything you wanted to add by way of conclusion?
I think that's an awesome list. I think everyone's going to face a different set of circumstances, and I think a part of facing these kinds of problems involves recognizing how your individual circumstances are unique. How you fit in the larger network of things, because everyone's location in that network is unique and distinct. But these general ideas, I think strategies at the broad level can be useful for many people. So I hope listeners find them useful. I think I've certainly found each of them important throughout my life, certainly. So I think that's a solid list, and thanks for putting it together.
Great. Thanks, Caleb.
Awesome. Bye, Michael. Thanks for listening to Stoic Conversations. Please give us a rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify and share it with a friend. If you want to dive deeper still, search Stoa in the App Store or Play Store for a complete app with routines, meditations, and lessons designed to help people become more stoic. And I'd also like to thank Michael Levy for graciously letting us use his music. You can find more of his work at ancientlyre.com. And finally, please get in touch with us. Send a message to stoa@stoameditation.com if you ever have any feedback, questions, or recommendations. Until next time.